Hi everyone, this is Mindy and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing some new products from Spellbinders, some Glimmer hot foil plates, lots of Christmas in July products. I'm going to walk you through what I have, and then I'm going to take you through my process of me creating 3 cards. So let's go ahead and get started. Now these are some of the plates that I have, starting with the Joyful Glimmer. I don't end up using it today, but I will be using these in the future. This is the De-light-ful Christmas. That's a glimmer plate. This is the Poinsettia Bloom. We have the layered holly background and glimmer holly background, and then a Merry Little Christmas Sentiments set. So those were hot foil plates. Then I have some 3D embossing folders. So we have the Holly and Foliage, which I will be using today in the video, and this is the Vintage Ornaments. Now we have some stitching dies, and I did some stitching over the weekend. I don't end up using everything in the video today, but definitely saving them for in the future. That first one I showed you was the stitched Starry Argyle. Then I have the stitched Poinsettia and Holly. So that one you can see I already went ahead and did my stitching with some gold thread. I just popped on Netflix. I did a binge watching of Pirates of the Caribbean and just stitched a bunch of these. Now this one is the stitched Christmas tree. I did in gold thread. I added some mirror gold cardstock over the top in some traditional red and green. And then I also added that layer on the back so it's nice and flat. Then I also did one in a dark blue cardstock with a light blue thread. And I did mirror silver on the top of that. So this one is the stitched Christmas sweater. Now I really like the elements that go on top of the sweater. This is the snowflake I did in some silver thread. And then I also did this circle one. I thought it was really pretty. I did that in gold thread with white cardstock. I didn't do the tree just yet, but these fit or are meant to fit on top of that sweater. I'm going to use them as kind of a focal point on my card fronts. Now this video really is just kind of a mesh of my process when it comes to creating. When I had a bunch of products together like this that go so well together, I kind of pick out a few things that stand out to me and then just make a bunch of it. So the first thing I start with is the holly background, and I'm going to glimmer foil that using the gold glimmer foil. And I take my gold glimmer foil, I trim it down to about the size I need, place it down onto some Hammermill cardstock so it's pretty side facing up. I tape my plate so the plate design is facing down, and then I flip that over and place that on my Glimmer hot foil system. I hit the button and I'm going to wait until that green light turns solid. Then I can disengage that plate and run that through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cut machine. So that is going to transfer that glimmer foil onto my cardstock. I do like using the Hammermill, but I know Spellbinders also has a specialty cardstock that works really well too. Now you want to be careful because these plates do tend to get quite hot. So I'm removing my tape there. That is the best ever craft tape from Spellbinders. And I'm going to peel up my foil. So I have this beautiful gold shiny background. Now you can use this on its own on colored cardstock, or you can combine it with the coordinating stencil, which I will be showing later on in the video. Now I had gone ahead and I did a bunch of backgrounds with that, and now I'm going to be doing a bunch of sentiments. So this is the sentiment set, a Merry Little Christmas sentiment set. These are Glimmer hot foil plates with coordinating dies. And what I did is I just sat and did a bunch of sentiments. I started with the same dark blue cardstock that I used for one of my stitching trees, and I'm doing that in a shiny gold. I do it on green cardstock and also some red cardstock. I'm trying to keep it fairly consistent. So some things I did in like a brushed gold, some I did in that bright shiny gold. And then it dawned on me, my tree had silver mirror cardstock on it. So I decided to go back and do some of those on that dark blue cardstock with the silver foil so that it was going to match my tree. So this is really my process when it comes to foiling things or embossing things is I just go through and do a bunch of them. I try to stay with a similar color palette. Like I had the traditional red and green cardstock and the blue to match my tree. So I'm limiting what I have to play with. Otherwise, I'll get very overwhelmed. Now this one, I had a couple of them where the sentiments didn't transfer very well. And that was because my ceiling fan was kind of kicking up the cardstock when it was on the Glimmer system, and it just didn't turn out. That's just totally my error, nothing to do with Spellbinders. Now, this is where I decided I needed some silver sentiments to match my silver tree because I knew I wanted to pair these sentiments with some of those trees. I really loved how those trees came out. And another thing I truly love is having coordinating dies to die cut out those sentiments. So here you can see as I'm removing that foil, these transferred so beautifully on that dark cardstock. And there's just something about that dark blue with either the silver or the gold that just really stands out and looks so gorgeous. So now that I have a bunch of sentiments done, I have some backgrounds done, I'm going to bring in that layering stencil. Now, like I said earlier, you can use this background as is, but of course, you know me, I love a layering stencil. And one thing I learned about this is these are not meant to line up perfectly. They're going to kind of have an imperfection to them or a whimsical look. And that's totally fine by me. I think that's a really fun look. I have this one on a dark green cardstock and I came in with a dark green ink. Now this is a dye ink. If I wanted to have these colors stand out a little better, I probably should have grabbed my oxides because oxides will sit on top of the cardstock versus these dye inks that are going to sink into the cardstock and it's not going to show me much of a change of color. But I started with dye ink. I didn't feel like grabbing my oxides, so I just kept going with it. This is Juniper. These are from Concord and Ninth. There's really not much of a difference with that on that dark cardstock. I still think it looks amazing and really stands out. This is Sprout. It's a light green. I didn't think it was going to work, but I decided to try it anyway. But when it came to the berries, I decided to bring in a white pigment ink. I thought that would stand out a little bit better and versus having a red there. So I just used a blending brush. I'm using my magnetic station to hold my stencil down and went over that with a white pigment ink. So that really did stand out. I do love how that background turned out. I think next time I'm going to try it with oxide inks. I knew I also wanted to include these 3D embossing folders for my backgrounds, and on the plate system from Spellbinders, it shows you how to use a 3D embossing folder, which is the platform and then an adapter plate. So I grabbed 3 pieces of cardstock and off on the side there in the very corner, I'm wetting both sides of the cardstock with a baby wipe. This is going to help from cracking of your cardstock and really just gives amazing results with the 3D embossing folders. So I placed my cardstock inside that. I think this is the Holly and Foliage 3D embossing folder. I placed my cardstock in there, placed my adapter plate on top, and ran that through the die cut machine. And we have such amazing embossed image on there. I love how this came out and I love the design. So you can see how it really just, some of those areas stand out more than others. Now I have my green piece of cardstock that I wet with that baby wipe. I'm going to place that inside of the embossing folder. Repeat the same steps, just place my adapter plate on top and run that through the die cut machine. I'm also going to repeat these same steps with red. So of course, the reason I chose these 3 colors was because they were going to match what I already have for just the smaller elements and the sentiments. Now I sped up this portion because it's really just me playing around with ideas. I did a bunch of backgrounds, I did a bunch of sentiments, I have some smaller elements, and I'm just kind of mixing and matching and figuring out what is going to look best. So I did speed that up a little bit, but I still wanted to kind of show you the process. Now, once I have everything kind of figured out on what I want to use and the backgrounds that I'm going to do, I can kind of step up those backgrounds, which is what I'm going to do with some ink. So I started with white pigment ink and a flat blending brush. I tapped off a lot of it onto my work surface, and then just very, very light-handed going over that embossed panel with the white pigment ink. So that's going to help some of those raised areas stand out a little bit more. I'm going to do the same thing on my dark blue background. I don't really need to add any more ink. I like the subtlety of this, but I thought for the green background, I would change it up just a little bit and bring in a dark green ink. So same thing where I kind of tap off my excess and then I'm going over all of that. And you can see how that dark green just really makes those embossed areas pop off of the card. It's one of my favorite things when it comes to 3D embossing folders. Now, of course, I can't resist adding splatters. Now, this splatter I'm adding is a very white gold, and I really should have probably used silver or white on my blue background. I didn't think of it at the time. This kind of white gold is still really pretty, but I did change it up for my red background where I added the white splatters instead. And I think it just adds a little bit of something and I guess a little more interest to the background. Splatters obviously are just one of my favorite things to do for my cards. I think one of the trickiest things I have found with using 3D embossing folders is getting them to attach to a card front because we do have those areas that are recessed, so it doesn't always catch the adhesive. And a thing I found that works really well are double-sided adhesive sheets. These are from Altenew, so I trimmed them down to fit the back of my panel. Some of them I cut a little short, which actually led me to the decision to trim these down a little bit. So all of my cards are going to be trimmed down to 4 by 5 1/4. And I do have some white side folding card bases ready to go. So I'm going to have a little bit of a white border going around all of the edges. Now you want to make sure when you're using those double-sided adhesive sheets, you really press down to get into those recessed areas on the back of that panel. Then I can remove the backing and place that on my card front. I'm taking this die. This is off of the stitched Christmas sweater. It's one of the elements that would go on the sweater. I placed some foam squares behind it. I'm adding it to the front of my card panel. I have a sentiment here. Now, I should have really ahead of time die cut my sentiment a few more times to layer it and give dimension. Instead, I had to trim down some foam squares to add that dimension. I did learn for next time, so off screen, I went ahead and die cut some sentiments out of plain cardstock so that I can layer it together. Now, this one I really do think, honestly, is my favorite, this dark blue. I think it's a little different and just really stands out nicely. So I die cut all of these extra pieces and I can layer them together with liquid glue. I find this a lot easier sometimes, especially when I have small areas like that word happy. That is pretty small. So instead of sitting there trimming all those small foam pieces, I can just layer up my cardstock. Now with my stitched Christmas tree, I added liquid glue to the back and I'm adding that to the front of my card panel that I already went ahead and added to a card base. And I'm also going to take my sentiment, add liquid glue to that and place that over the top. And then I'll take something heavy, like you can take your Misty tool or an acrylic block and set that down and let it sit. So while that one is adhering and drying, I'm going to move on to my third card. Once again, taking that double-sided adhesive sheet, adding it to the back of the panel, and then adding this to the front of a card base. So this one, once again, I'm going to take that tree and I do have that backer on it, so you're not seeing all the thread on the back. And I added liquid glue to that, place that over the top. I'm going to take my block and just set that on top for now as I layer together my sentiment, the season's greetings. And then I can add liquid glue to the back of that and place that over the top. I have these 3 cards finished up in the video, but I have still some other pieces, other backgrounds that I want to turn into cards. I just kind of ran out of time. This is that red one. So this is my red Christmas tree with the gold thread and where I took the dark green ink and went over the top. My blue card here, I love how this came out with the silver and the white ink over the top. And then this is the one where I used some of the elements from the Christmas sweater. I love all of these cards. Such an amazing release from Spellbinders. I'm going to have all of the supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. And be sure to expect more from me because I still have more elements, more products to play with that I'm super excited and looking forward to. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you again real soon.